Good evening, everyone. My name is Meredith Tui, and I'm the Director of Programmatic Operations at the American Nutrition Association, the ANA. The ANA is very pleased to be hosting Dr. Deanna Minich and Victoria Behm tonight to explore 2022 trends in the personalized nutrition space. Dr. Minich is a nutrition researcher, educator, and functional medicine trained clinician with a unique approach to nutrition that combines physiology and psychology. She has served on the Institute of Functional Medicine's Nutrition Advisory Board and Curriculum Committee, in addition to being a faculty member teaching nutrition for the Advanced Practice module for environmental health. Her academic background is in nutritional science, including a master's degree in human nutrition and dietetics and a PhD in medical sciences. In conjunction with her academic degrees and extensive teaching experience at the university level, she is a fellow of the American College of Nutrition and a certified nutrition specialist. Dr. Minich has over 20 years of experience working in both the food and dietary supplement industries and has more than 40 published scientific articles in journals such as Nutrients, Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism, and Nutrition Reviews. Victoria is a certified nutrition specialist with a master's degree in nutrition and integrative health from Maryland University of Integrative Health, where she teaches culinary nutrition and life cycle nutrition. She is also currently the manager of nutrition science here at the ANA. Welcome, Dr. Minich and Victoria.
Well, Deanna, let's start with you because we don't get to talk very often. So when we're talking about trends for 2022, what comes to mind? Just what's sort of the first thing that pops into your head?
I think devices, more diagnostics, more point of care tests, more putting metrics into the hands of consumers. And I'm already seeing that now with continuous glucose monitors, with vessel health, with a variety of different either apps, people I think it goes back to what Dr. Bland had said some years ago, that if you don't measure it, you don't change it. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there is an emergence of all of these different types of tests that are really empowering people's choices. So I think we're going to see more of that. And those tests, I think, will be connected in some way to nutritional therapeutics, which are personalized for meeting those specific needs. Because right now what we're seeing is that there are a lot of these tests, but not necessarily always the follow through on the intervention side. And I think we're going to see more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is really something that I gathered from our 2021 conference, especially in the panel discussion at the end, is that we have this early adoptive phase, right? And everyone's really excited and, people are getting their continuous glucose monitors. We're wearing our smartwatches. We're doing tests like the microbiome tests that are coming out. And then there's sort of this pause where there's data gathering and analysis and figuring, and R&D is going on. And, all these companies are trying to say, now we have this information, what are we going to do? And I think one of the big topics that came up at our meeting in 2021 was the idea of democratizing healthcare. And this, I think that to your point, the wearables and the apps are so much a part of that process, but we haven't really gotten past the gap between the early adopters rather, and those who really can benefit from the creation of the technology, from the lab assessments, those people who have complicated healthcare pictures and really need that information. So I think that's what I'm kind of hopeful for 2022, as we start to see a little bit more of the application that comes from the development of the assessments and what we do with that data.
Yeah, because I do think labs are valuable, but they're a snapshot in time. I think we're starting to recognize that there are limitations. And even if we think of women with hormone cycles, diurnal rhythms, there's so many different rhythms that we're up against that it's like, how could we ever think that one lab every 6 months can really say everything about us, right? So,
right, exactly.
We're naturally going to gravitate in that direction. And I'm relieved because, again, it helps. I mean, just case in point, I've been using that vessel health test and measuring, and I am seeing that my magnesium is low, consistently low. And I never really thought about it. So it's really bringing it front and center for me. And I think, again, that metrics stimulate behavior change and compliance. So I'm excited for that. I think it will empower more people.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what Vessel is, it's an at-home test. It's a urine test that you can just do in the morning. There's a smartphone app, and you can scan the test strip, and it tells you in real time what some of your nutrient values are. And I think cortisol is on there, and a couple of other really nice markers to have a sense of what's going on day to day. So I think that sort of the in-home testing, we're able to have a little bit more control over when we test. We can kind of work on our own personalized nutrition and are at home without necessarily going to a lab or you could certainly call up your favorite personalized nutritionist for advice and kind of work in it. It's a different dynamic than having to order labs every few months, as you mentioned. And then with that brings really to mind for me, the question of accessibility and equity when it comes to lab assessments. And I mean, that could be applied to personalized nutrition practice. It could be applied to research. Right now, do you think that we are at the point where much of the new technology is accessible? And if not, what are some of the things that you're thinking about in terms of where we need to go to make this stuff more accessible to more people?
I think most people have a phone these days. I mean, I even see I see even homeless people in my neighborhood on their cell phones. And so I'm thinking, wow, cell phones are ubiquitous. It's kind of like everybody's calling card. And so one of the things that everybody has on their smartphone, more or less, and I'm thinking, I have more familiarity with an iPhone, but I would think that other phones, Android, would have this as well. Some kind of health app, which is free and already downloaded. So what you have on that are ways to assess things like your steps. So even something basic that's something that's accessible to all. There is also for free on there tracking your menstrual cycle. There are a number of different things that you don't even have a subscription. You don't need a subscription. You don't need an additional device. You just track it yourself. But it does require that you monitor and that you engage. I mean, it's not like, just like the menstrual cycle inputs, you have to do that manually, right? But then you'll get pop-ups like, this is a possible period day. This is a predicted day when you're ovulating. It's very useful, I think. And again, this is all good information to put people in touch with their body rhythms. Mm-hmm. So I do think that there's a bunch of stuff. And then that doesn't even speak to the pen and paper kinds of things that are available to all, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's just even taking pictures of our food, which can cue us into just even looking at what we've got there. I mean, this is a tool that all nutritionists should be using, right? It's, and there are different apps. Now, these are cost requiring where you can take a picture of the food and then it will help to populate what foods are in that dish and then ultimately get you to a nutrient level or analysis. So
yeah, that technology is really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops in the next couple of years. Yeah. And I think, when it comes to accessibility for most people, there are things that the science is really well developed. We're much further along. And then there's things that are still, we're figuring out. And so having some sense of what maybe is worth investing in at this point, for example, nutrigenetic tests are pretty well, there's a lot of science behind them. I think they might be worth the investment for some people, especially if they're really willing to dig in and kind of tweak. Whereas something like microbiome testing is still pretty new. We're not necessarily sure what the next steps that someone should take are when they get those results. So there could be some sort of spectrum of what tools and technologies are like, yes, let's do this, let's incorporate this, and some things that we maybe want to wait, if we're not the early adopter type, to maybe wait a little bit and save money or save resources until things are a little bit further along. And of course, that will depend on the person, what kind of conditions or symptoms they're dealing with, and what their practitioner team is able to incorporate. So any thoughts on that sort of, what should people be focusing on, and how can we do that in a clinical setting?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I like your idea of a spectrum of where to play based on your accessibility, your income. I think that there's a smart way to do this. Let's just say that somebody is trying to figure out, do they buy the good gym shoes now, or get the bypass surgery later, you know, the $50 investment now versus the $50,000 operation later, kind of a thing. I've seen an ad on that. I think that was Blue Cross. I'm not sure who did that, but it was really interesting. And I kind of think that health is like that, right? Like sometimes there are these sporadic, smart investments that we could make to learn more. Because one of the biggest questions I always get is, how do I know if these supplements are actually doing anything for me?
Yeah.
Let's just take a very simple one, the omega-3 index, right? We always hear how important it is to take omega-3 supplements. And then people say, well, how much? And then they don't see a direct benefit. But there's a very simple test at about $50. And we know that red blood cell membranes of these fatty acids change about every 120 days. So if we just test, spend the $50, we'll get informed as to whether or not we're at that proper dosage for where we need to be. Just case in point, I've seen people where they've actually gone really high in omega-3. They haven't even realized how high they are. And then it's like, oh, well, maybe I can back off of that now, right? They're going to actually save money, but it was only that they're saving because they invested a little in order to learn where they were at. And of course, then there's a safety issue too. You don't want to go too high in omega-3s. You don't want to offset that omega-3, omega-6 balance. So I think all in all, a little bit of testing is very smart for helping us to determine what are the next steps. And then to do that periodically. I mean, vitamin D is another one of those.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And maybe we're overdoing it. Or maybe we're not doing it enough. So I think it's like that. And the other one that comes to mind, like when you mentioned nutrigenomic testing and kind of getting into SNPs, I do think that it's worthwhile for people to get their methylation SNPs. And the reason why is because methylation ties into so many different things, ties into risk for cancer, ties into how we move toxicants out of the body. And for some people, just shining a light on that can help them with the root cause for potentially some unexplainable symptoms, as long as they're working with a qualified nutrition professional who can guide them through, because that's a more complicated terrain. But I think just by getting that, and then once you know, you don't ever have to do that test again. Now you know.
Right.
You know, the beauty of the SNPs is like, that's constitutional. That doesn't change. So if you make that investment, it's a one-time investment to learn about your constitution for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And for those who are listening who might not be familiar with nutritional genomic testing, most companies are either direct to practitioner or direct to consumer. I highly recommend a direct to practitioner test that, or one that at least gives you access to a practitioner to be able to help translate that information. But those tests are not terribly expensive. They're, I don't know, $100 to $200 typically. And then if you're interested, you can go to the ANA's website. We have a practitioner finder, and you can identify certified nutritional genomic specialists who can help you translate that information. And I know that we have such a great team of folks who have just graduated with their credential, and it's very exciting to have them out in the world doing that work. I want to go back to vitamin D, Deanna, because of course we are still in this COVID moment, and we all wish we weren't, but the research on vitamin D and how the appropriate amount of vitamin D, the appropriate serum levels have been correlated with a less severe outcome of COVID, whether it's not getting infected in the first place, but more importantly, having less severe instances of COVID or lowering mortality. So that's something that we're really paying attention to right now. And I hope that we can get more public health messaging out there about the importance of adequate vitamin D levels. So just talk about, either vitamin D or other elements that you think are just so crucial right now for folks to learn about and hear about when it comes to COVID, building immune resilience, and then just affecting our health for the long run, because this is not going away probably in 2022 or in the next couple of years. So it's going to be with us.
Yeah, it's true. I think that our nutritional spotlight has really gone into the direction of certain vitamins and minerals. One word of caution about that. I think that now that vitamin D has been in the limelight, it's almost like when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The old adage of like, oh, you have an immune issue, just take more vitamin D. You have autoimmunity issues, take vitamin D. And nutrition is the science of relationship. So if we start to take high levels of vitamin D, we need to be conscientious about the other nutrients that vitamin D plays with and requires. Case in point, magnesium. Magnesium is required for the hydroxylations and activation of vitamin D in the body. So if somebody is taking high vitamin D without compensating for something like magnesium, or even looking at calcium or the vitamin K2, it's kind of like, when we start to just hammer on one nutrient, I get a little bit, I think that, again, there's a smart way to do it. A smart way to do it is to work with a practitioner who can assess vitamin D together with magnesium and some of the other mineral levels to ensure that there's a healthy balance. Because otherwise it's the situation of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like, we're going to take from one place in order to give to another, but we're going to come up short somewhere. This is when I think of Dr. Bruce Ames's triage theory, right? Like, any reaction is, we have certain foundational reactions that are necessary for life. And so if we are constantly taking from certain reactions, then we're going to fall short somewhere else. So yes, I think vitamin D is important. Absolutely. The science is replete, but then there's also a bunch on vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, and all of the isomers. I can't take favorites on any of the nutrients because they're all important. You could go for a deep dive down the rabbit hole with any of them. And I've noticed that this happened to me in graduate school when I started studying the carotenoids. Then it became like, well, everything is about carotenoids, brain health, skin health. Like, you can't live without carotenoids. So I would just caution us against becoming a little bit too enamored with one particular nutrient and not seeing the whole. Stepping back, seeing the whole, and realizing that nutrition is complexity. It's holism. It's not reductionism and just supplementation with mega doses of one nutrient in the hopes that it's going to rescue you and prevent you from getting some disease or condition.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I think for me, that brings up, just the basic foundations of eating a rich, colorful, plant-based, diet that we talk about all the time. And, there's really no more sage wisdom than the wisdom that we know, inherently, that we've been taught, that I hope people will have more and more ability to implement. And also the aspect of testing that we talked about. We shouldn't be taking super high doses of something if we don't actually know what's going on in the body. So I would say, vitamin D is one, let's get tested every 3 to 6 months. If somebody has a genetic report and they're able to see what they're, how they're metabolizing vitamin D, such an important aspect of the picture when you're taking a single nutrient, which should always be supportive of a really well-balanced, rich diet. And I also I was thinking, early in the pandemic, everyone was like, take more antioxidants, just all the antioxidants that you could possibly get in your body, will help you. And we really quickly, I think that the scientific community came back and said, like, take it easy. We don't want to overdo taking a single group of compounds because they have their negative effects. There are tolerable upper limits for a reason for many nutrients. So I think for the layperson, working with a practitioner is really important, but also just finding really well vetted information is also part of this puzzle. And unfortunately, there's a lot of confusing information out there, but we do hope that the ANA will be a resource that folks can rely on when it comes to getting solid scientific and evidence-based balanced information.
Absolutely.
So I think, one of the other pieces that has to do with COVID, and maybe we can sort of sit here for a while, is the focus on mental health that I think is going to be not just a focus for the ANA. 2022 is our year of mental health, but also for many other organizations. I've noticed the topic coming up a lot, and mental health difficulties that folks have had as a result of COVID, whether isolation or being ill, caring for loved ones. There's a lot that's been going on. So tell me what you're thinking about mental health as it relates to not just COVID, but just the state of the world right now and how nutrition plays a role for folks.
Yeah, this is one of those, I think, underestimated, undervalued aspects of looking at nutrition science. I think most people, when they think of nutrition, they think of, oh, I need better nutrition to reduce my risk for chronic disease or other disease states. I want to reduce my risk for cancer, heart disease, hypertension, whatever it is. And I don't think that many people have looked at mental health as being connected to nutrition in the same way. Like if most people knew that they could help their risk for depression, anxiety, even for the risk for suicidal ideation could be helped by nutrition, I think that people would have a very different relationship with their food and potentially different nutrients. And in fact, it was nutritional psychiatry that was really one of the pioneering fields in the early 20th century that really got nutrition science underway. And I have seen that there's this cluster of nutritional psychiatrists. I remember being, I think it was New York City some years ago, and I was going to a different conference, but as I was coming out of the hotel, I saw a sign that was a conference on nutritional psychiatry. And I was thinking, I need to be there. I'd love to hear what they're talking about. So I do think that there's a subsection of psychiatrists who understand that connection and are connecting those dots. And I think that it's so interesting to see that interface between nutrition and psychology for nutrition professionals. Food for mood. If we eat colorful foods, we have colorful moods. And the nutrition science is evident. If you look at PubMed research articles and publications, there's a preponderance of data. Like there's no question that there's a relationship between mental health and the foods that we're eating. And the reason why, if we just go back to the basics of pathways, we could see that many of these nutrients, these vitamins and minerals, are required as cofactors for the synthesis of things like hormones and neurotransmitters, the things that drive us in picogram amounts, but they drive us, do require nutrient. I mean, vitamin B6, vitamin C, even for dopamine and a variety of different things within the body, our stress response. It's just, some core basic biochemical principles. So I do think it's big. And that's where we are as, I would say, a global community, is that we're seeing it infiltrate our mood state into poor sleep. People aren't having the same, having a different tone towards work life. I just think in general, there's more stress about things that has been heightened. So we could help that potentially through nutrition. There's an opportunity there for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Stress, certainly. And I'm also thinking about the GI and microbiome and the effects, on serotonin production and other neurotransmitters that, for something like 80% of Americans have some sort of GI disruption. And so for all of those people to start thinking, oh, this is actually really important for my brain health right now too. And one of our scientific advisors, two of them actually, are brain gut experts, and just thinking more holistically about how the connections in our bodies, what we're bringing into our bodies that actually influence those connections, I should say, and that our gut talks to our brain a lot more than our brain talks to our gut. And I think that's stuff that we know as practitioners, and it's information that I've found typically surprises people who aren't in the world of nutrition, that just taking care of your GI health might do a whole lot to improve mental state, relieve some feelings of anxiety, and also, getting outside. We've talked about this in previous conversations, just being outside in nature, green therapy, getting your fingers in the soil, walking barefoot, whatever it is that translates into a boost in mood for folks. Being with family, for some people who've probably been holed up with their families for a long time, maybe it's getting some time alone, reading a good book, taking a bath, those lifestyle factors as well, that we really take care of ourselves. And I've seen in particular among millennials right now, just this huge push for self-care, which I really applaud. And I think maybe especially for those of us who are working right now in the pandemic and caring for others, it's been really easy to not participate in self-care. And I feel like that's such a big piece of the puzzle, along with robust nutrition.
Very true. Self-care is an essential. It's kind of like, foundational work on ourselves before, just really investing all of our energy into others.
Mhm.
It's a simple, like, it's like an energy inventory and a currency, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
But
that's
there are
great.
so many different ways to do self-care. It's not like we have to go get a massage and spend money. It's not like we have to go to a spa and hang out there the whole day. Like I almost consider it like we think of intermittent fasting. I think we can have intermittent self-care. So like little bits of like, okay, I just need a 5-minute break, like just to pull away from everything, go sit outside. It could be super small and free. It could be playing with an animal, just like taking a break from one's workday. It could just be, I mean, so many different options there. Like I just posted something on social media today about small things that have great impact that don't cost anything.
Yeah, great.
Those things, they're like, they have a huge ripple effect, right? Like if you're doing something, then you're going to help to cultivate that milieu, that environment for somebody else, to give them permission for it. Like if somebody sees you needing to have alone time, it's like, oh, that kind of triggers them to maybe think about the alone time,
Yeah.
So
Right. I know. And I tend to have stress headaches by looking at my computer all day. So I just stare outside for a few minutes, or, just go take a quick walk with the dog. It's just anything that can help. There's like micro dosing, essentially, self-care, I think. So I love that, how you put that. And for those folks who are interested, and I should highlight that we will have one of the world's most well-known nutritional psychiatrists at our 2022 conference. We're so excited about. And so the theme of the conference is mental health, and we'll have, of course, our standard really wonderful science and practice conference. We'll have a clinical track, and this year we'll be adding a public event as well. And we're just so excited. I hope you'll be there, Deanna. And I know that a lot of our board members and our scientific advisors and just the wonderful minds that we have as part of the ANA ecosystem will be there. So for those who are interested, the URL is the ana.org/personalized nutrition summit. And I hope that everyone will go and check it out. Registration will open in 2022.
absolutely. Everybody needs to be there. And I think it's so exciting that there is a consumer event, like we're connecting to the public, because that's what the ANA is about, right? It's it really straddles into both spheres, the professional sphere, but then translating that into the public as well. So I think that's really wonderful to have a tandem event like that.
Yeah, we're so excited. So we're thrilled to invite anyone who's watching to keep tabs on the conference, and we will give you more information as it's available. And Deanna, there's so many things we could talk about. I'm sure we could keep going all day long, but I really thank you for your time today, and welcome anyone who's interested to check out our website, theana.org. We have several membership tiers, including free membership tiers. So if you're just interested in getting your foot wet a little bit with nutrition, we have a resource center that's launching in 2022 that will be providing more digestible, no pun intended, and translatable nutrition science for the public, for practitioners. And we hope that everyone will take advantage of those resources. And Deanna, always a pleasure. Thank you for just everything you do for our organization.
And I say the same to you, Victoria. You are really a bright light in the organization, and so glad to be having this conversation with you. Get everybody excited and equipped with some tools to really take people into new horizons in their lives, and really to look at the bright side. How do we do that? And much of that can be established internally. So it's great to be part of that mission.
Thank you.